welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're doing something a bit different. It feels a bit like, like digging up a time capsule.
That's a great way to put it. We're going really, really specific.
Usually take this big wide-angle lens on a topic, right? History, science, tech. But today, we're zooming way, way in.
It's microscopic, really. We're not looking at a decade or even a year. We're looking at one single month.
October 1980.
Exactly. And to do this, we're leaning on this fascinating source. It's a script from a program called Nostalgi-AI Live.
Right, the episode's called The Pop Culture Report. And just to set the table for you, this isn't some historian looking back from today. The source script has these two characters, Dave and Johnny, and it's their real-time reactions.
In October 1980, they're just sitting in a garage, drinking sodas, talking.
And that's what makes it so valuable, right? It's pure emotional data.
There's no hindsight bias. I mean, these guys, Dave and Johnny, they have no idea the internet is coming. The Cold War hasn't ended. They only know what's right in front of them.
So let's start there. The vibe, what was right in front of them. The source paints a very specific picture.
Oh, it does. It's autumn. You've got the leaves turning, the heater's kicking on for the first time.
We can almost smell that, the dust burning off the radiator.
It's so tactile. But beyond the weather, there's a word the source uses to describe the energy that I think is just crucial for all of this.
What's that?
They call the energy electric and restless.
Restless. That's such a good word for it. They say 1980 has been a wild ride so far.
And historically, it was a heavy year, right? You had the hostage crisis, economic problems, political tension.
For sure. But in this garage, it feels more like a nervous excitement.
Exactly. And that's our mission today on this deep dive. We're going to decode that excitement. We need to look at what Dave and Johnny were watching, what they were listening to.
The games they were playing.
All of it, to really understand the cultural psychology of that exact moment.
And speaking of psychology, we have to talk about the economics. The money. Because there's a line in this source that it stopped me in my tracks.
I think I know what you're talking about. The movie ticket.
The movie ticket. Dave is genuinely mad. He is outraged that he had to pay $4 for a ticket.
$4?
To us, that sounds like a typo. You can't even get a bottle of water at the theater for that now.
But in the script, he treats it like it's the end of the world. Prices are getting crazy, he says.
It's a perfect example of how relative inflation is, right?
Absolutely. We have to remember, in 1980, inflation was historically high. I mean, we're talking double digits. So for Dave, a $4 price tag isn't just a number. It's a real pain point. He's feeling that pinch.
It's not, wow, this is cheap. It's, I can't believe I'm spending this much. But here's the paradox, and this is what I found so interesting.
Go on.
He complains about the price, but he still pays it.
And that's the key, isn't it? It's that lipstick effect theory. Even when times are tough, people find money for these small indulgences.
He pays the $4, and right after complaining, he says something like, for a movie that good, it's worth every penny.
So the value proposition holds. If the art is good, the wallet opens.
And it wasn't just movies. The source says he also bought a 45 RPM single record.
Which, for our younger listeners, we should probably explain. It's a little vinyl record. One song on the A side, one on the B side.
And that cost him $2. Again, he complains, but then he calls it the best $2 I ever spent.
It just shows this fascinating relationship with entertainment. Money's tight, inflation is a real fear, but culture movies and music, that was the escape.
And they were willing to invest in it.
Absolutely.
So let's look at what they were escaping into. What was on the big screen in October 1980? The source gives us a really interesting snapshot.
It really does. It shows a cinema landscape kind of pulling in two completely different directions.
First up, they mentioned the Elephant Man.
David Lynch.
Which surprised me. I mean, these are two guys in a garage having bro talk over some sodas, and they're discussing a black and white art film.
And they call Lynch a genius. It sort of challenges our assumptions about the average moviegoer back then. It seems like general audiences were engaging with serious films.
They do warn each other it's a tearjerker, but there's a respect for it.
Right. But then you have the complete pivot. In the same breath, they bring up Private Benjamin.
Goldie Hawn, which they call hilarious.
So you have this amazing balance. You go to the theater 1 week to cry, and you go back the next week to laugh.
It sounds like a healthy ecosystem. The theater was for everything, not just, one type of spectacle.
Well, speaking of spectacle, There's a ghost haunting this whole conversation.
A blockbuster shadow.
Exactly. The source makes a really specific comparison. Dave says, these movies are good, but nothing touches the hype of The Empire Strikes Back,
which came out back in May of that year.
5 months earlier, which is an eternity in pop culture time, but they are still talking about it.
It's the benchmark.
It's the new standard. This tells us that by October 1980, the blockbuster era was officially here. Everything they consume is now being weighed against Star Wars.
That's a great point. Empire isn't even really in theaters for them anymore, but it's this lingering presence.
It set a new bar for what an event was. A movie wasn't just a movie anymore. It had to be a phenomenon.
Okay, so visual entertainment is booming, but let's shift to the audio side. The source spends a lot of time on what's on the radio, and honestly, it sounds like a war zone.
The script literally calls it a battle.
Yeah, a three-way fight. It's rock, disco's leftovers, and this new pop sound. That phrase, disco's leftovers, it feels so aggressive.
No, it's incredibly telling. You got to remember, just a year before this was the Disco Demolition Night in Chicago.
Right, the cultural backlash.
So disco is dead, but its DNA is still everywhere.
And according to Dave and Johnny, who's winning this battle,
Queen, no question.
Another one bites the dust. The source says it's literally everywhere.
And this is where the deep dive gets really interesting. They praise the song for its iconic bass line.
Which is legendary, yeah.
But that bass line, that is pure funk. It's basically a tribute to the band Chic. So you have Queen, this massive rock band, playing what is essentially a disco funk track.
And the rock fans in the garage absolutely love it.
So while they're saying they hate disco leftovers,
the biggest song in the world is one of them.
Precisely. It was the perfect transition song. It let the rock guys dance without having to admit they liked dance music. It's a stealth disco track.
That's brilliant. It really shows how genres were starting to blend, even if the fans didn't want to admit it. But it wasn't just Queen.
No, not at all.
The source also mentions the other side of the spectrum. Barbra Streisand's Woman in Love.
A monster hit. Just massive.
And Dave uses this very specific way to measure its popularity. He says you can't walk into a grocery store without hearing it.
The grocery store test. I love that detail because it shows the complete lack of curation in their lives. Today, you put on headphones, you listen to your own personal playlist.
In 1980, reality was curated for you.
By the grocery store manager or the guy at the gas station. You couldn't escape the monoculture. Even if you were a metalhead, you knew every single word to that Barbra Streisand song.
Because it was just in the air you were breathing.
It created this shared vocabulary. Even if you hated the song, you could talk about it with your neighbor because you both heard it when you were buying milk.
And that shared environment brings us back to the tactile part of this. Dave didn't just stream Another One Bites the Dust. He got in his car, he drove to a store.
He found the 45, and he bought it. It changes your whole relationship with the art.
How so?
Well, when you pay $2, which to them was a crazy amount, for just 2 songs, you are committed. You're not going to listen once and skip. You're going to listen till the grooves wear out to convince yourself it was worth it.
Right. You have to get your money's worth. A deeper bond out of pure economic necessity.
And scarcity. You owned that piece of plastic. It was yours.
Okay, moving from the garage into the living room. If we're talking monoculture, we have to talk about TV. The source is very clear about who the king of TV is.
Dallas.
Who shot JR?
It's almost a cliche now, isn't it? But reading the script, you feel how urgent and fresh it was in that moment.
Oh, yeah. Dave says, the whole world is still asking. And he's like, we're going to find out soon. I can feel it.
The anticipation is just palpable. This wasn't just a TV show. It was a global event. The source even mentions water cooler talk.
Which we use metaphorically now for, Twitter trends.
But back then it was literal. There were 3 channels. Everybody watched Dallas. If you didn't have a theory about who shot JR, you were socially isolated.
It was a form of social currency.
That's it, exactly. And it extended to sports, too. It's October, so of course they're talking about the World Series.
The Philadelphia Phillies versus the Kansas City Royals.
Right. And the focus is all on one guy, Mike Schmidt. The source calls him a machine.
Dave says, I've got my money on Mike Schmidt.
It just paints this picture of a world of heroes and villains. J.R. Ewing is the villain. Mike Schmidt is the hero. These figures were larger than life because everyone was watching.
There was no fragmentation.
None. You just had Mike Schmidt.
So we have this picture of a very cohesive, communal culture. Everyone's watching Dallas, listening to Queen, watching the World Series.
It's a collective experience.
And this is where the source takes a really sharp turn. There's something new creeping into that garage. Something that signals a huge shift away from that communal experience.
It's a cutting edge.
The source introduces us to a little plastic block.
Magic cube.
Or the Rubik's Cube. I love that they use both names. It shows the branding hadn't quite stuck yet. But the way they describe it, it's just different.
It's frustratingly addictive. Dave says he's been twisting it for 3 hours straight.
3 hours, staring at a little plastic cube.
And he mentions the physical toll. My fingers hurt.
That's a pivotal moment. Think about it. Watching Dallas is passive. You sit back. The cube is active. You lean in.
And it's solitary. You solve it alone. It's a battle between you and the object.
The source links this obsession to something else, too. He pairs the cube with Pac-Man machines down at the arcade.
This is it. This is the dawn of interactive gaming culture. And listen to the language again. I'm never getting any sleep again.
It's that restless energy again.
But now it's focused on a system, a puzzle. This is the moment entertainment shifts from watch this story to beat this system.
And the source actually makes a really bold prediction here. Dave says, mark my words, the 80s are going to be the decade of the puzzle.
I love that line. We think of the 80s as the decade of greed or neon or action movies, but the decade of the puzzle? That's a fascinating lens.
It fits, though, doesn't it? The personal computer was about to enter the home. That's the ultimate puzzle.
It is. People were learning to interact with algorithms, even if they didn't know the word. Whether it was a Pac-Man maze or the cube, they were training their brains for the digital age.
The gamification of society, starting right there.
And notice the shift in location again. Dallas is in the living room. The communal space. The Rubik's Cube. Dave's doing that in the garage. It's a retreat.
It's the beginning of geek culture taking over the world.
Right there with a half-finished soda and sore fingers.
So when we step back and look at this whole pop culture report, the expensive movies, the music, the TV, these new puzzles, what's the final portrait of October 1980?
I think it's a portrait of a society in transition, a society in suspension.
Unpack that a little.
Well, look at the radio. Disco is dying, but it's not dead. Rock is evolving, pop is rising. Look at the tech. We're moving from analog TV to digital interaction, even the seasons, the leaves are falling, the heater's turning on.
It feels like everyone is just waiting to see who shot JR, waiting for the World Series winner, waiting to solve the cube.
Exactly. The 70s are culturally over. And Dave and Johnny are sitting on the precipice of the real 80s. The high-speed neon 80s haven't quite started yet. This is the deep breath before the plunge.
And despite all the anxiety, the $4 tickets, the inflation, they seem pretty optimistic.
That's the electric vibe. They're excited about the future, even if that future just means never getting any sleep again because of Pac-Man. They can feel things speeding up.
It's really striking how much of this specific month's culture just became iconic. We are still talking about Pac-Man and Queen. People are still speed-solving Rubik's Cubes.
That's the power of this specific moment. October 1980 was a remarkably fertile month. The things that were cutting edge back then became the bedrock of modern pop culture.
It really makes you wonder what people 40 years from now will pick out from our current month, What are the Rubik's Cubes of today?
It's a humbling thought. But looking back at Dave and Johnny, there's one last thing that stands out to me.
What's that?
Their confidence. They're so sure about their world. They know Dallas is the biggest thing ever. They know Queen is the best. They know the Rubik's Cube is the future.
And to be fair, they were right about a lot of it.
They were. But that brings us to a final, maybe slightly provocative thought for you to take away.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you're sitting in that garage with them. It's October 1980. The heater's humming. You've got your soda. And you are 100% convinced that the Rubik's Cube is the absolute peak of human innovation.
Right. You have no idea what the internet is. No idea that a device in your pocket will one day hold every song ever made.
You are completely blind to the digital revolution that's just around the corner. So the question is, if you were sitting in that garage, what would you have been most wrong about?
What was the blind spot that Dave and Johnny couldn't possibly see coming? Was it that the monoculture of Dallas would shatter? Or that the solitary puzzle of the cube would eventually connect everyone globally?
That's the question. We always think we see the future clearly, but most of the time we're just staring at the spinning colors of the cube in our hands.
Something to chew on. We'll leave you there, in the garage, October 1980. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
See you next time.